Good morning. Welcome to Plugged In. We have another little story about Moses right after this. Well, it is good to be back. We weren't together last week. This time last Monday morning, I was still in Boston visiting our middle son, who actually lives in St. Louis but had been traveling for his job, and flew mom and dad up to visit with him for the weekend. And so good time to get away. It is good to be back home, and it is a busy week on us this week with Easter coming up, but it was good to get away. It is good to be back with you. If you want to follow along, I'm going to read just a short verse in Hebrews here in just a little bit, but this verse reminds me of the many different traditions that we follow or that we practice or that we hold. This weekend was my wife's birthday, so we celebrated that in various ways. And last night at her mom and dad's, had a nice little dinner and some dessert, and she blew out a few candles. Not as many as how old she is, but I'm not going to go any further than that. But, you know, those birthday celebrations are wonderful. The recognition of that, recognizing and paying attention to the years that someone has had in their life. And so we have that. We have Christmas. We have Halloween. We have the 4th of July. We have Memorial Day coming up. But this week in particular is Easter. And Easter's kind of different in the sense of that it doesn't always fall on the same date or the same month. Sometimes it's based on how the calendar falls, and sometimes it falls in March, and sometimes it falls in April, maybe the first part of April or the last part of April. But what seems to be a huge part of Easter is an Easter egg hunt. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of research on that this week to find out who came up with that. And I remember when I was growing up, you know, we'd get up in the morning on Sunday morning, and there would be some Easter baskets. And back then, you didn't have plastic eggs. We had real eggs that were colored in there, and we'd hide those eggs. And even if it was raining, we'd hide them in the house, and then we'd go look for them and all that kind of stuff. And you had to make sure that you found all the eggs then, because if you didn't find the real eggs, then eventually there was a smell, even if it was outside. So, but there was little gifts that we would give and such as that. But because I grew up in church, I also knew that the true meaning of Easter was the celebration of Jesus raising from the dead. But the story that I'm going to share, or at least the verse that I'm going to share, talks about a tradition that had started back in the days of Moses. There's a whole lot of stories to tell about Moses, but if you remember, there were 10 plagues that God sent on the land of Egypt because Pharaoh was so hard-hearted, he would not let the people go. And the final plague was that the death angel would fly over Egypt, fly over that area. And what would happen is Moses had been instructed and Moses was to instruct the people, that they were to take the blood of an animal and put it on their doorpost. And that death angel would come through, and if the angel saw the blood on the doorframe, it would Passover. Thus we get the name Passover, the Passover celebration, the Passover meal. And so just like we have our different celebrations in touch with or connected to some event that happened, maybe it's 4th of July and the celebration of our birthday, nation's birthday, the nation of Israel always, and those who are religious in any way, understand what the Passover meant. Now, I share that with you for this reason. In Hebrews chapter 11, and it's going to show up here on your screen here, but we've been talking about these things that Moses did by faith. And some of the things that he did were of just great feats. Like, I think if you keep on reading, you're going to find out by faith he crossed the Red Sea. But on this one in particular, verse 28, it says this: by faith, he kept the Passover and the application of blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. In other words, this was not just a one-time event. This was not just a one-time command. This was not just a one-time observance that God gave to Moses. After they were liberated, after they were freed, then the Israelites would celebrate this every year. Moses kept this going. It wasn't just something that, well, it happened this time and now we're done with it. And he was putting his faith in what it totally meant. Now, I tell you this for this other reason. It's ironic that on Thursday of this week, what is known as Passion Week, the week in which Christ is making his way to the cross, if we look into the scriptures and we do enough reading to pick the dates, on Thursday evening is the traditional view as to when Jesus met with his disciples for the Last Supper. And the Last Supper was not just a gathering so somebody could paint a picture, by the way, but there was something significant about that Last Supper. It was the observance of this Passover. But ironically, this blood that covered the post, Jesus' blood would cover our sins. So Jesus is observing the Passover, but Jesus does something else. He also institutes the Lord's Supper, something that he wanted of his followers to remember and to practice on a regular basis as the sacrifice that he gave. The commercial world tells us that Easter is about bunnies, eggs, and whatever else they want to come up with. Well, it's kind of like Christmas and them saying it's about Santa Claus. We celebrate Christmas to celebrate the birth of Christ. And we celebrate Easter to remember what Christ did for us on that Friday when he died. But we celebrate Easter because on Sunday morning he rose from the grave. And I hope that you have a wonderful Easter weekend. Thank you again for joining us. Remember what this week is all about. And we'll see you next Monday on Plugged In.